Are you planning to do some charitable giving as the holiday season approaches? Well, keep listening as we discuss some tax efficient ways you can give to others. Hello, and welcome to the Wealth Minded MD podcast with your money best friends. I'm Dr. Alicia Taylor.
And I'm Dr. Brittany Helford.
And of course, we're here to help you build wealth and make good money decisions so you can create the life you desire with more control over your time. If you've been looking for a financial planner who truly gets you, let me tell you about Bonafide Finance. Ben and his team at Bonafide Finance are like the primary care physicians for your finances. They take the time to understand your goals, meet with you regularly for financial checkups, and build real trust and rapport so your plan grows and adapts as your life changes.
What really sets Ben apart is his expertise. He understands student loans for high-income earners, something most planners overlook. And he's a tax strategist, helping you invest your money in the most tax-efficient way possible. And the best part, Bonafide Finance operates on a flat fee model. So you always know exactly what you're paying. No commissions, no hidden costs, just honest financial guidance.
Ben's approach isn't just about making your money grow, it's about making sure your wealth aligns with your life. So if you're looking for someone who can manage your investments, grow your wealth, file your taxes, and help you with your student loans, there's only one choice: Bonafide Finance.
Book a consultation at bonafidefinance.com/wealthmindedmd or email hello@bonafidefinance.com and tell them we sent you.
All right, Brittany, what's going on over there with you as the holiday season approaches?
Well, Alicia, guess what? Guess who's hosting Thanksgiving? I am. I received a text message from a friend. We typically go over her house. And she's like, oh, yeah, so my husband said that he'll make the turkey. What else should we bring? And I was like, oh, so we're hosting this. I thought you said that your husband doesn't like to switch things up. He doesn't like to leave his house. She's like, yeah, but I talked to him and I convinced him. So I'm like, okay, just give me a second to think. Let me breathe for a minute. Yeah, so my mind is like, I'm running towards the finish line, thinking about how we're going to host this family, which is a family of 6 in our space. We have enough space, but we don't have like enough table seating. So I'm just trying to figure out some of those details. I got a menu. I'm like, okay, I can cook a little bit this weekend, but I'm actually working this weekend. Anywho, we're going to have food on the table and we're going to enjoy, but I'm a little stressed.
Got it. Well, as this episode comes out, it'll be after Thanksgiving. And so I'm sure the people will want to know how things turned out. Are you planning to purchase any items, get things delivered, or are you planning on you're making most of the things yourself?
So I drove past like Honey Baked Ham store or something yesterday, and I was like, you know what? I should probably order a ham. So I think that's the only thing that I'm going to order. And then the other things are like macaroni and cheese, spaghetti salad, rolls, and sweet potato
Did
pie.
you say spaghetti salad? I don't think I've heard of that term. I probably have eaten, given our backgrounds, I probably have eaten some version, but I don't, maybe we call it a different name. Spaghetti salad seems very
Yes.
intriguing.
Yes, it is spaghetti salad. So, I mean, there are versions of pasta salad, but with this,
Oh, it's a
yeah,
pasta salad.
it's a pasta salad, but we use spaghetti noodles. And then we also use a seasoning called Salad Supreme. We put cheese and Italian dressing and all these vegetables, and it's good. Brooke knows how to make it. It's like one of her favorite things to eat. So she knows how to make it at this point. And she's made sweet potato pie enough that, with my assistance, of course, we get it done. So I'm happy that I have her assistance, and then I'll have the assistance of our nannies. So one of my nannies like, just don't worry about it. I'll come over afterwards. We'll clean up. If it's not completely clean, it's okay. This is a mom who we've gone over their house multiple times. She has 4 kids, a family of 6. So she's seen a mess. She's seen toys. She's seen a mess, and we'll make it as comfortable as we can. But I'm just trying not to stress out because there's like a lot on my plate. And when I host, I can get very, very particular about how things are. So I'm just trying to like take a deep breath. The food's going to be good. The kids will figure out what they're going to do. Like, it's okay.
Oh, well, we are sending good vibes your way, and hopefully you can report back on how things went for your Thanksgiving dinner. Yeah, I haven't hosted any major holiday, partly because I don't live in a home, so there's not enough space. I'm in an apartment, so I'm usually going over other people's houses, which I enjoy because the food is ready when I arrive, and then I leave, and I don't have to clean up or anything. The houses are usually decorated very nicely, and I'm thinking to myself, wow, that's lovely. Glad I didn't have to do that. And And so sending good vibes your way. Hopefully everything goes well. Is there anybody else that you all are going to invite over, any family, or is it just this family?
Yeah, it's just his family. We thought about inviting another church friend family. They are unavailable, but we don't have too much family in Boston, just my husband's aunt. And we could reach out to her. That's a good thought. It just adds more to my plate just to add more people because then I also have to think about more seating and cooking more. So the other family that we invited was just a family of three. So it was pretty small. And their son is one of KJ's favorite people. Like he has certain people who he just absolutely will not vibe with. And then he has certain people who he like will die for. And so their son is one of those people. They just love each other. They're always looking for each other at church. And Langston is his name. He sees Langston as a big brother. So that's who we invited. But unfortunately, they're going to be in Atlanta actually. So maybe I should tell them to come through wherever you going.
Girl, I'm not even gonna be here. They're gonna come to empty house, okay? As we said, this episode will come out after Thanksgiving, but I'll be in Texas for Thanksgiving
Oh, okay.
and then here for Christmas. It is interesting. Do you all ever go to Michigan for Thanksgiving or leave town?
Not typically for Thanksgiving. That we usually go away for Christmas, but usually because Thanksgiving, so I'm working all the way up until Wednesday. So that's also making me a little stressed. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm off on Thursday. I guess I'll be staying up late and waking up early. Usually I'm either working on Thanksgiving or working right up to Thanksgiving or right after Thanksgiving. So there's not much wiggle room because my preferred holiday is to be off on Christmas.
All right, well, let's get into the episode today. I know that it's the holiday season. And one of the things about the holiday season that studies show us is that this is the time of the year where a lot of people give. They do a lot of shopping, but also this is the time of the year that people are usually thinking about others as well. And they might consider making larger donations during this time of the year or donating to different causes, different people more than they would have earlier in the year. And, I'm all about it. I love giving to others. I think it does something internally to yourself whenever you are able to give resources, time, energy to other people. So it's one of my core values. And I'm sure that other people might think similarly. And so I thought this would be a good thing for us to talk about are some different money savvy ways and tax efficient ways to do our charitable giving around this time of the year.
Yeah, Alicia, I love it. I think I probably give as much, or we probably give as much as you, but I think you and I feel a little bit differently about our giving. It's one of the things that brings you a lot of joy. You get really excited about the gifting and all of that. I give because I know that I should. And I usually give like, oh, this is an organization that aligns with my values, Doctors Without Borders or supporting children without food. And so that's kind of how I give. I give out of like, oh, okay, I have more. I am so grateful for what I have. And I want to help you all to provide the services to the people that don't have enough. But I don't get super excited. It doesn't make me like super warm and fuzzy usually like it does for you. So I'm interested to hear some of the ways that you also give and see how I can maybe adjust my giving so that it brings me a little bit more joy. I'm not the Grinch, people, but yeah.
It's interesting that you say that. It's so funny, actually. I think last month is when the initial invite came out, but I was behind an email, so I didn't check my email until later. But it was so funny because I actually got an invite from my church about this dinner. And I was like, what is this dinner? Are they raising money for a new building or something? What is this going on? And essentially, the church that I go to, they have a lot of different groups or ministries, like there's the prayer ministry, there's the usher ministry, there's the greeters, you have different roles within the church. Our pastor feels like giving deserves to be its own ministry as well. And that oftentimes people are celebrated for the various gifts that they have that they bring into the church, like the gift of prayer or the gift of whatever. But oftentimes the people who give a lot are not always recognized. And oftentimes it is the gifts that allow the church to be able to do all of these wonderful things within the community and abroad. So anyway, he was sort of recognizing folks who I guess had given over a certain amount. And it made me question like, well, how much did I give? What is going on here? Did I accidentally put in an extra zero on my last donation? Like what happened here? It's like, whoa, I guess I did give a lot this year. Yeah, it was so funny because I actually went to the dinner. And I had never gone to these dinners before. And I talked to one of the ladies there and she said, yeah, usually this is a dinner for people who have sort of given above their tithes. And I was like, I don't think I gave above or I didn't mean to. Maybe I need to double check. I don't know if I was included on accident. But anyway, I was saying all that to say that one of the biggest recipients, I guess, of my generosity, shall we say, is my church, just because I'm Christian and I tithe and that's a core value of mine. That I also give in other ways, which I'm happy to talk about during this episode. But I really wanted to give the folks maybe like 5 or so points points of things to keep in mind as they're doing their charitable donations this year. And point number one is to make sure that your donation qualifies for a tax deduction. Now, I'm not saying that you can only give or should only give if you can get something back on your taxes, but I do think that you should keep that in mind if you are somebody who is already planning to give, because I believe that there's been some changes in the tax code where if you file your taxes a certain way, you might be able to get more of a tax deduction this tax year than maybe you have in the past. So those are some things to kind of keep in mind. But if you're somebody who's planning to give to a charitable organization this year, and you would also like to receive a tax deduction for that gift, there are a few things you need to know. One is that the donation has to go to a qualified charitable organization, not necessarily an individual person or a for-profit business. So it needs to go to a qualified charitable organization. Usually that's some sort of 501c organization. And you can't receive anything in return if you want to get a tax deduction for it. So people who maybe get those emails to buy popcorn for the school fundraiser, you can't deduct the amount you paid on the popcorn in order to get the tax deduction. So you can't receive anything in return. And you also need proof of your donation. Usually a receipt will do it. Now, it's not like when you file your taxes, the government is going to say, show us all your receipts. But you want to make sure you have them in the event that you get audited so that they can verify that you actually gave a donation to a charitable organization. But if you follow those rules, right, you give it to a charitable organization, you didn't receive anything in return, and you have receipt of your donation, then usually you can get a tax deduction. And for those who itemize their taxes, which I believe a lot of physicians might, then that tax deduction can be pretty substantial. Brittany, I know that this is something that you've probably taken advantage of in the past.
Yes, we donate a significant amount, not only to our church, we tithe, but above that, because my husband sits on boards of various organizations who do fantastic work. You know, they support homeless youth, they provide different programming for youth and community resources for other organizations that really uplift the community. And so with that, there's a requirement that we have to give a certain amount, but we also donate above that. But it's really interesting, Alicia. I appreciate that you bring this up, because sometimes when you go to organizations, like recently there was one for this pediatric center, which is doing phenomenal work here in Boston. The woman physician who spearheaded the initiative, she's just very thoughtful of how to support patients even outside of their clinical diagnoses. But we went to a gala as a fundraiser, and so this one didn't actually auction off anything, but oftentimes you see that they're auctioning off, oh, you can get a Airbnb at this resort, or here's some tickets to the Boston Celtics game and things of that nature. And so when you get something in return for that donation, it's not necessarily just a donation. It's like you're auctioning off. So that actually doesn't qualify. So I'm glad that you bring this up, because around this time of year, you'll see that you'll get those invitations to these types of fundraisers. But the donations, not only do you get the warm fuzzies that you're doing good, but yes, the tax deductions can be good. It's not the end all be all, but it is a good incentive for your giving.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think sometimes people think, oh, I'm trying to save money, so I'm going to give to charity. And what I remind people is you don't actually save money by giving to charity. Right? When you add up what you donated plus what you paid in taxes, it is not less. But what it does do is for people who were already planning to give, it allows them to pay a little bit less on their taxes, which I know can sound confusing. So let's give people an example. Let's say you make $100,000 a year for easy math and you pay about 20% in taxes. Most doctors are paying much more than that, but just roll with me here. Brittany's like, yeah, I don't think that's realistic. So let's say you make $100,000 and you pay 20% in taxes. So that means you're going to pay $20,000 in taxes. That's scenario number one of somebody who didn't give anything to charity. But let's say that you make $100,000 and you made a $10,000 gift to a charitable organization, let's say your church or some other organization. Then what that does is decrease your taxable income from $100,000 to $90,000, right? So you get to subtract what you gave from your taxable income. So now the amount of tax that you owe is $90,000 times 20% instead of $100,000 times 20%. And so what that does is say, okay, now you only pay $18,000 in taxes instead of the $20,000 in taxes that you would have paid. So as you can see in this example, right, you saved $2,000 in taxes, but you also gave an additional $10,000 to charity. I realize that this might sound confusing, especially if you are maybe listening to this while you're driving, you're like, wait, huh? How did she come up with those numbers? The point that I'm trying to make is that it's not a dollar for dollar reduction in taxes, it's a percentage that you get to deduct. And so, again, my point is if you are somebody who is already planning to give, then for sure, see if you can get a tax deduction out of it. But if you are not somebody who's planning to give, I wouldn't necessarily give these large sums for the sole purpose of saving money in taxes.
Yeah. This example that you provided just illustrates the difference between a deduction and a credit. So when you say dollar for dollar reduction in the amount of taxes you owe, that is a tax credit, right? And not a tax deduction. So that's a huge distinction here. And I think sometimes people get that confused. But again, the reason for giving is not for the tax deductions. That's the bonus, right? But the reason for giving is because you support an organization that aligns with your values, that is going to make a contribution in the world that ideally is going to be greater than the amount that you're actually giving, right? The value that you're providing to the charitable organizations that you are supporting.
Yeah, yeah. So, point number one is just if you are somebody who is planning to give to charity, you might want to make sure that that donation is tax deductible and planning to use that when you give it to your accountant or when you file your taxes next year. All right, point number two is to be strategic about the timing of when you give, because I think many people may not realize that when you give money can matter just as much as how much money you give. And the reason why the timing matters, the reason why when you give matters, is because of the tax deduction and how the tax code works. When you are filing your taxes, you have the choice between taking the standard deduction or itemizing your deductions. And the answer on which one you should take is usually which one is going to save you the most money. And so for a lot of doctors and high income earners who maybe pay a lot in state taxes, give a lot to charity, contribute a lot to their work retirement accounts, et cetera, maybe it does make sense to itemize their taxes. For somebody who simply has a W-2 job and they don't have a lot of other taxes and things that they are paying, then maybe it might make sense to take the standard deduction, right? And so when you are giving to charity, most of the time you can get some sort of tax deduction, but the amount of the deduction that you get really depends on how you file your taxes. And something that is starting in 2026 is that if you take the standard deduction or if you itemize, you will still be able to get some sort of tax benefit, but the amount of the benefit will vary. But for 2025, right? So for the year that's ending in 2025, it still plays by the old rules, right? And so again, the timing matters. A lot of people may do what you and I do, Brittany, which is maybe they want to tithe, maybe they want to give a percentage of what they make to their church. And so as they get paid, they give money to their church. But if the total amount that they give in a single year does not add up to more than the standard deduction, then they're really not getting much of a tax benefit for doing so. And that person might have been better by giving a large amount every other year instead of giving small amounts throughout the year. Because if you give a large amount every other year, then you'll be giving such a large amount that now you can itemize your taxes and really take advantage of that tax deduction. Versus if you gave a small amount throughout the year, then you might not be eligible for that tax deduction. And so this is something to keep in mind. This is why the timing of when you give matters. But like I said, starting next year, so next tax year, no matter how you file your taxes, you'll at least be able to get some benefit from doing so.
Alicia, I love the strategy that you're proposing. Being strategic about how you're giving or when you're giving is so important if you're trying to optimize your taxes. Like if you just want to give because the organization now is under new pressure and not receiving as much support from other sources that were previously existing, and you're like, okay, they're in trouble and I need to give today. They can't wait for me to optimize my tax strategy. Then by all means, yes, give when the organizations need it because that's the ultimate reason for giving. But if the organization is good and you're like, okay, I'm just going to double up next year, then I love that strategy to really think about how much you're going to give, think about all of your deductions in that tax planning period. And that way you can ensure that you're saving enough in order to optimize the tax deduction. This is a phenomenal thought, one that I personally don't consider because we itemize our taxes every year. It's just like, okay, I'm just going to give it every year because it's going to help me every year. Like we have more than enough to itemize. So that's not a calculation that I particularly make, but for someone who maybe is a renter and doesn't have like their mortgage interest deduction or don't have some of the other things that they're doing, or there's a transition, then I think that this is a great way to be very thoughtful about how they're maximizing their giving.
Yeah. And, when I say give every other year, I don't mean you need to hold every donation that you're planning to give for 24 months. What I mean is, let's say you give around $12,000 a year to charity. Let's say it's $1,000 a month and you give that $1,000 every single month. Well, if you are a single filer, that's less than the standard deduction. And so if you did that, you wouldn't necessarily get a tax break or tax benefit from doing so. So if you, instead of giving $1,000 every month, one year you held that money, and instead of giving $12,000 in that year, you instead saved it and gave $12,000 January 1st. And then that following year you gave $1,000 each month. Then you've got $24,000 that you gave in that one calendar year. And that's more than the standard deduction for a single filer. And so then you would be able to get a tax break. And so my point here is, like, you don't have to hold it for forever. You could just really, instead of giving a large sum at the end of the year, maybe it might make sense to give a large sum at the beginning of the year, one year, instead of, doing it periodically. So this is just some things to keep in mind. If you have an accountant, maybe consult him or her and ask them about, hey, do you have a approximate amount that, I might give this year? Or are you planning for me to itemize my taxes or take the standard deduction? Do you have any insight on to whether or not I should give this large sum that I'm planning to give to charity before the year ends, or if I should hold off until the next year? And so just maybe consulting somebody, if you are unaware of how much you've already given or how you filed your taxes, that might be really beneficial. All right. Point number 3 is consider donating stock instead of cash.
Now you speak in my language, Leisha.
It's so funny. When I hear this, I think, ooh, people must be rich. They're giving stock. Maybe this is the perception that I built up in my head, but it just sounds so like, oh, she's got it. She got stock. But I really do think that this one can really save people a lot of money, especially if you own individual stocks or maybe even index funds in a taxable brokerage account. So going back to the basics, whenever you are investing money, oftentimes you are purchasing assets that have increased in value over time. And there are a lot of different ways that you can purchase investments or assets, right? You can do real estate, you can do crypto, you can do stocks and things like that. So in this example, we're talking about stock. And when you are purchasing stocks, whether you are buying them individually or buying them in groups like mutual funds or in index funds, right? You have the option of where you're going to put your investments. A lot of people put their investments in retirement accounts, their work 401k, work 403b, or maybe in a Roth IRA or a traditional IRA, right? That's not what we're talking about here. We are talking about people, for the most part, who have stock in taxable brokerage accounts. So have stock in accounts that is not necessarily retirement accounts. So if you put money in your work retirement accounts and in your individual retirement accounts, and you still have money in a taxable brokerage account, this is something that you might want to consider. The point is that when you donate stock that has increased in value, you not only have the ability to give to charity and help them, but you also avoid the taxes that you would have paid on the stock if you had used it yourself, if you had sold the stock yourself. Let's say you bought Amazon stock years ago for $5,000. Let's say, I don't know, you bought 1,000 shares for $5 a piece. That's probably not what Amazon costs, but just roll with me here. So let's say you bought a lot of Amazon stock and the total amount that you spent was $5,000. And let's say now that amount of stock that you purchased back in the day is now worth $15,000, right? So it's tripled in value. One of the things that you could do if you wanted to donate to charity is you could instead say, I'm going to give $15,000 in cash to my charitable organization. Or another option is you could donate the stock instead. And what I'm trying to say is that by donating the $15,000 worth of stock, you actually benefit in a few ways. One is you get credit for the full $15,000 donation that you have given to charity. 2 is you save money because you actually only spent $5,000 on it. And then 3, you don't pay taxes on the $10,000 that it increased in value. Because if you didn't give the stock and you instead kept the stock and then you tried to sell it to get your profit, you would have to pay taxes on the profit. But because you instead donated that stock, you avoid paying taxes. And so this means that when you give stock instead of cash, you're able to help your charity. You keep more cash in your pocket, and then you lower your tax bill all at the same time. And so this is something to really keep in mind if you are somebody who has stock in a taxable brokerage account and your church or charitable organization accepts stocks as donations.
I really appreciate it that you bring this up because this is something that we're doing this year actually for one of our donations. So still on my to-do list, have not done it yet, but it's going to get done. One of the reasons why I decided to give stocks this year is because I purchased some stocks in a taxable brokerage account, and they are stocks that are causing a lot of taxes, not only in just like capital gains, but also in some dividend income. And so I'm trying to get them out of our taxable brokerage account. It's like, okay, this is a good way for us to get them out without me having to pay all of the taxes. But for some investments, Leisha, I'm just thinking about, okay, if I were to sell those investments and get and pay the capital gains tax is about 20%, depending on your income, and then maybe that additional 3% that high income earners have to pay for their capital gains over a certain amount. And so that's 23%, where my effective tax rate is about 31%. So it's like, do I want to get the tax deduction on the amount that I am earning, or do I want to get the tax deduction on the capital gains? And it just really depends on what your situation is. This is a strategy that works. Another thing is, like, say, for example, you want to get 10 grand, but you don't have 10 grand in the bank, right? Or you don't want to take it from your emergency fund or whatever, but you have the 10 grand in your taxable brokerage account. So it's another way to utilize assets that you have to still align with your goals. So it's definitely a strategy that we are using this year, and a strategy that many affluent people use. But then, when thinking about the tax benefit, it could be a discussion that you want to have with your accountant about, like, what's going to work out best for you, to just give cash and get the tax deduction on that end, or to save on the capital gains tax.
Yeah, you brought up a good point, which is, yeah, Alicia, you're saving on capital gains taxes, but that means you're not saving on your W 2 income. And some people may prefer to pay less taxes on the amount of money that they're earning from their job versus saving taxes from the amount that their stocks and investments have increased, right? Are you going to try to save regular income taxes, or are you going to try to save money on capital gains taxes? And the answer might be a little bit more nuanced, right? For a lot of physicians who are in the highest tax bracket, they're saying, hey, overall, it makes more sense for me to try to save money in income taxes because I'm in such a high income tax bracket, versus other people are saying, hey, my investments have grown substantially to the point that actually I might pay more in capital gains taxes than I might from my job. Or, maybe like you said, their church is raising a large sum of money for some certain project, or a charitable organization that they've heard of is raising a large amount of money for a certain project. And although they want to give and donate, they don't have the cash on hand to give and donate. And so doing so from a taxable brokerage account allows them to still make that donation without necessarily having to tip into their emergency fund. So I love the examples that you gave. And I do think that this is something to keep in mind, that there are other options to give. And so if you come across an organization, a cause that really resonates with you, that you want to contribute to, understand that there are these other options available to you as well. All right. Point number 4 is to consider using a donor advised fund. So I have friends who have mentioned to me in passing of, Leisha, oh, I'm thinking about starting a private foundation. Or I would love to start a charity for this cause or that cause. Or maybe they know of a particular cause that will be raising funds soon, right? But they're not raising the money right now. If they say to themselves, hey, I am a generous person, I consider giving to be one of my core values, but Leisha, I just haven't found a charitable organization that resonates with me right now. What can I do? I don't want to waste money and give money to an organization that doesn't resonate with me, but I still would like to put my money to good use and give. And that's where I really think a donor advised fund comes into handy, because it can help with all of these problems. So a donor advised fund, or a DAF, is a certain account that allows you to essentially get a tax deduction without necessarily giving the money to charity right away. So what do? So you put the money, or you can put stock, into a donor advised fund, and you get a tax deduction for the amount of money or the amount of assets or stocks that you put in there. And then you can keep the money in there, you can keep the stocks in there, you can keep the assets in that donor advised fund for, I think, as long as you want. But eventually you have to give it to a charitable organization. And so if you're somebody who hey, I myself might want to start a charitable organization, then you could just donate money into your donor advised fund, let that money build up and continue to grow over time. And then when you finally do start that charitable organization, you can then transfer the money in that donor advised fund into your charitable organization and use it that way. Or, as I mentioned before, if somebody has a charitable organization that they're planning to start in the future, you could put the money in the donor advised fund today or in this tax year, and then give it to them in the future whenever they start it. Or again, if you haven't found a charitable organization that resonates with you, but you still want to give because you like the tax deductions and you just want to be a generous person, then you could, again, transfer the money into a donor advised fund, get the tax deduction, and then wait until you find a charitable organization that you like, and then give it to them then. Now, rules about the donor advised fund. Once the money goes in, it can't go out, right? You can't put the money in a donor advised fund and then be like, oh, I need that money for my own house or for my own self. It has to be in there, right? But I do like the donor advised fund. I think that it gives you a lot of options. A lot of other people I know, Brittany, use a donor advised fund because it feels like it allows them to give even more to charity. And we can debate the nuances and the morality of that. But what they will say is like, hey, Leisha, instead of giving $1,000 a month to my church, I'm going to instead put $1,000 a month into this donor advised fund because each month it's going to be growing. And then at the end of the year, maybe instead of giving them $12,000, I can then give them $13,000 or $14,000 because the money in the donor advised fund has grown over time. So I'm able to give them more. When you put the money in a donor advised fund, you can invest the money that's in that fund, right? So it gives your money an opportunity to grow over time. But I just want to bring this up because I don't know if some people know that these sorts of accounts exist, and it might be a really good way for you to give to charity in the future, but take the tax deduction this calendar year.
I think this is great. And this is something that I've actually been considering. I have a couple of emails actually that I have not responded to and acted on about setting up a donor advised fund. And one of the things for us, though, just right now, is the organizations need the money now, and so delaying is not something that is in agreement with the timeline at hand. So for me, I'm just like, okay, I'm going to kick the can down the road. But I could definitely understand if we had a windfall or some type of inheritance or something, right? And we wanted to allocate and distribute that money over time to various organizations, then this would be critical, like a critical piece in that strategy in order for us to do so. And unfortunately, right now, we have not gotten an inheritance or a windfall, and the organizations need the money. So we're giving the money outright. But this is definitely something that's been on my to-do list because my husband keeps saying like, okay, I want to do more. How do we do more? And this is a way, even just a small contribution to a donor advised fund, as you mentioned, like $100, and let that $100 be invested for the future. That would be a great way to kind of save for our charitable giving every single month, even if we have already given to the organizations that we want to support this year. So I really like that. And it's one of the things that I am exploring.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. This is great. One thing to keep in mind about the donor advised fund is that, you can set them up at Fidelity, Vanguard. There's a company called Daffy that you can set them up, but look at the fees. Usually when you open up these accounts, they might have certain fees or investment minimums or donation minimums or certain different little requirements. Each one is a little bit different. Some may be a little bit more lenient than others, but just make sure that you pay attention to that as you are opening up a donor advised fund if that's something that you choose to do. All right, point number 5 is to explore charitable giving options in retirement. I know that maybe a lot of the people that listen to this show may not be retired, but I do think that you might know somebody who is, whether it is a close friend, an acquaintance, or maybe even a family member like your parents, right? Maybe you know people who are retirement age or who have already retired and they might get money from a pension plan, or they might get money from their old jobs, 401k, 403b, that sort of thing, right? And so we're talking about people who have money in retirement accounts and are at the point where they're taking withdrawals from those accounts. So one of the things to consider is, instead of, again, giving cash, is to actually consider something like a qualified charitable distribution, which is giving money directly from your retirement accounts. When you do a qualified charitable distribution, this allows you to send money directly from your retirement account, and that money will not be taxed. And so you won't pay taxes on the amount that you withdraw from your retirement account if you are then giving it to charity. And so it's a great way to meet any required withdrawals that you might have and to support causes that you care about. And so what do I mean by this? For those who have money in pre-tax work retirement accounts, like a pre-tax 401k, a pre-tax 403b, when you reach a certain age or you have a certain amount in there, at some point, the government's going to say, okay, you got to start taking some withdrawals, right? You've been delaying paying taxes on the money that you put in there. They're like, okay, we want our money now. You start getting to the point where the government says, okay, you have to take out an X amount of dollars each year and spend that money. And for some people, they're like, no problem. I was planning to spend it anyway. But other people, they're like, hey, my qualified withdrawal is $100,000 a year, and I just don't spend $100,000 a year. Maybe it's your aging parents who just don't spend as much as they used to because they don't travel as much, or maybe they're not as healthy as they used to be, or whatever it is. And so one of the things that they can do is set up a charitable trust. And there's a lot of different ways to do this. There's a lot of different versions of these things. But one example is a charitable remainder trust, which basically allows you to donate assets to charity while still receiving income from the assets during your lifetime. You receive money from what's in your retirement account or from what's in the trust. And then when you pass away, what's left goes to charity. For other kinds of trusts, it's the reverse. Some people set up the trust so that their kids get a certain percentage and then the charity gets a certain percentage. And so what my point is that if you are somebody who has a large sum of money in retirement accounts, or you know somebody who does, one of the things that they can consider either is doing, number one, charitable distributions directly from the retirement account, or number two, setting up some sort of charitable trust so that a portion of the money in the retirement account goes directly to charity, either currently while they're alive or once they pass away.
Okay, Leisha, I have a question for you with this because this sounds like a fantastic idea for those who are trying to meet their RMDs, right? They are maybe using other sources of income. Maybe they have income that's actively being generated because they still have kind of like passive investments and things of that nature and kind of drawing from their dividend income. So when you take a distribution, if it's a pre tax account, you take a different distribution and it's a qualified charitable distribution and you're giving that money away. Do you have to pay taxes on it at the time of that distribution? I would think not, but that's my question.
I don't believe so. I personally have not done this because unfortunately I am not retired. I am still working.
And if you were retired, you wouldn't have to take RMDs.
So unfortunately for us still working, I have not been able to test this out myself. Now, I have tried to convince my father to retire, but he has been resisting me. So unfortunately, I'm gonna have to ask some of my aunts who are living their best retired lives. But for some of my family members back in the day, they actually worked at jobs for 30 years. Back when people didn't used to switch jobs, they would like stay in the same job for 30 years and
Yeah.
then retire, after 30 something years with a Rolex watch and a pension. And so those are sort of the folks in my family. So I got to ask them from the smiles on their faces. It seems like things are doing really well,
Yeah.
but I'll have to ask.
Yeah, I would think that you wouldn't. And I would imagine that is similar to giving stock, that you wouldn't have to pay the capital gains tax, depending on how it's transferred, right? So if it's transferred directly, which you are saying that that's the methodology, then I would think that there would be no taxes. And if there's no taxes, that's fantastic. I never really thought about this as a tax strategy for retirement. I focus a lot about now, but also thinking about how do you create tax diversification in your retirement strategy. And I know a lot of physicians are just putting their money in pre-tax accounts or maybe taxable brokerage accounts, et cetera. So this would be a good strategy to say, okay, this amount of money in this pre-tax account, I'm actually going to give away. And I'm going to give it away and I'm not going to pay any taxes on it. So, more to come, people. We will figure out the answer to this because if there's no taxes to be paid, which is what we're assuming, then I think that this is a fantastic strategy for me to keep in the recesses of my brain so that I can retract it at the time of retirement.
Yeah. So to summarize, if you are somebody who is planning to give money during this holiday season, see if you can do so in a way that allows you to get a tax deduction. So instead of putting thousands of dollars in the piggy banks and cash, maybe you give to a charitable organization that can give you a receipt so that you can take a tax deduction or at least consider doing so. Being intentional, especially about the timing of when you give, keeping in mind that it might make sense to give large sums at the beginning or the ends of the years instead of giving throughout the year, to plan your giving. And if you're somebody who has appreciated stock, then it might make more sense to give appreciated stock than giving cash. And that's, an option that you have. Again, thinking about using other strategies that might allow you to save money while making an impact, such as opening up a donor advised fund so you can put the money in there, get the tax deduction in the calendar year, and then give the money at a later date. And also considering, if you're somebody who is retired or know someone who's retired, using some of the money that might be in the retirement accounts as a way to give money to other organizations. So these are some things to keep in mind. I wholeheartedly support anybody who wants to be generous during this holiday season. Would just also encourage you to consider what is some ways that I can actually maybe get a tax benefit for being so charitable and so generous.
All right. Well, talking about giving, let's give a little bit to ourselves. Leisha, tell me, how are you spending your money for fun?
Well, I am considering getting some Christmas pajamas. I mentioned that my parents are hosting Christmas this year. My mother has been bugging me about us getting matching pajamas. And I'm like, really? Okay, mom. Now we've got to figure out if we can find a brand of pajamas that all of us find comfortable. The men in my family are very tall, multiple people like 6'4" and 6'3". And so usually that means that the pants are not long enough. So seeing, which brands have extra long or extra tall or whatever. And so, yeah, so I'm going to do a little shopping, see if we can find some matching Christmas pajamas to make my mama happy.
That's so nice. So I buy those. That's typically my Black Friday buy, but I think I might buy them a little bit earlier this year because usually it is hard for me to get everybody's size, including, the kids' sizes and my husband and I. So I like that, mom. And I'm glad that she gave that task to you and she's not scouring the internet for deals and sizes. Oh my goodness. So I mentioned in a previous episode about I was considering investing in a facial. I scheduled the facial for yesterday, and it was so relaxing. It was so good. This morning, I feel like my skin has like a little bit of glow, like some of the wrinkles that I have now. I'm not that wrinkly because I'm only 39, but I'm approaching 40. And so you start to see some places like the nasal labial folds that I'm like, I wish this is not as prominent as it is. And it looks much better. So as I ended the facial yesterday, she's like, oh, we offer packages and you could buy 4 now and get a deal. And I was like, no, that's okay. But I actually think I'm going to do it because
Ooh.
it was so relaxing. And the fact that I can see like some of the changes right after, I'm like, oh, if I did this regularly, how good could I look? So I think that's going to be a budget line item. I think I'll probably buy a package and it's literally like a 5-minute walk from my house. So just build that into my self care routine.
Oh, okay. I don't think I've gotten a facial. Something about people rubbing on my face. I'm like, I'm good. But the way you talk about it with such joy makes me feel like maybe I'm missing out on something. And so maybe I will try to look into this too, since you're talking it up so much.
It can be a little awkward, honestly, but been someone who's struggled with acne for some time. So I try to do a little bit more for my skincare because it's been required in order for me to kind of keep it neutral and healthy.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Well, wishing you the best on your skincare journey, your
Thank you.
facial package.
Thank you,
Hopefully they
girl.
have some sort of Black Friday deal you can take advantage of. So hopefully you all found this episode helpful and at least came up with some new strategies for ways that you can do your charitable giving. Please don't forget to check out Bonafide Finance. That's our partner who we just think is fantastic. If you are somebody who's looking for a financial advisor, you want to end the year strong, please consider Ben Martinick and his team at Bonafide Finance. They are simply fantastic. And the fact that they can help you with your taxes and help you with your student loans and help you grow your money just makes it your one-stop shop for a lot of your financial needs. And so if you haven't already done so, click the link in the show notes. Go to bonafidefinance.com/wealthmindedmd and schedule your free consultation today.
Hello, everybody. It's me, Brooke. I'm recording a little disclaimer for my mommy, Dr. Brittany Halford, and her friend, Dr. Lisa Taylor. Just so you know, they're not financial advisors, tax professionals, lawyers, or financial planners. Everything you hear is for education and entertainment. It's not strict financial advice, So use your best judgment, chat with a tax professional, and all those other people that you need to talk to. Thanks for tuning in today. Keep cruising on your journey to wealth and wellness. Bye-bye.